Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Inside Job. Okay, so before I begin this review, I do want to kind of open with a bit of news. So, unfortunately, Inside Job Season 2 got canceled on Netflix, unfortunately. But, essentially what happened is the creator of the show, Shion Takeuchi, there were rumors circling around about for a while, but then he made an announcement saying that Netflix had actually rescinded its offer to fund the second season of Inside Job. So unfortunately, Inside Job kind of got canceled after one season, and unfortunately there's only 18 episodes of it now. So unfortunately there's not going to be a season 2 as of right now. That said, Shion Takeuchi, Alex Hirsch, they're all going to Adult Swim to try and get the show greenlit over there so they can continue with the second season. An uphill battle to be sure, since Inside Job is billed as a Netflix original. But yeah, they're trying to get the rights over to another place so they can continue this into the second season and keep going. But for the time being, the show's canceled. I'm just gonna. So what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna finish the first season of Inside Job. I'm gonna finish reviewing it because it is actually generally enjoyable, and I wish I had gotten the second season it deserved, and it gone on to finish the story that it wanted to tell. But unfortunately, that didn't wind up happening. So we're just gonna have to play it by ear, wait for that to get finished, and unfortunately, we're just gonna have to wait for that to happen. But in any case, this episode 9, with Mole Hunt is it's about a mole that's incognito, and this is kind of where the show actually kind of develops a plot, since obviously the first couple of episodes they were kind of just little vignettes that didn't really connect to one another all that cleanly. And, well, although they did connect they did kind of connect, because there was a bit of an overarching narrative, but not really, and I will explain that, because they do kind of establish that. But they mostly establish that there is in fact an ongoing plot line in this one, and going into the next episode, it does establish what that plot line actually is. So, and the 10th episode is the reason why I decided to review this, because otherwise it was just like, it's a bunch of sci-fi conspiracy theory bullshit. But no, there is a story to this, and it did kind of generally sit up and go, I need to review this now. So that's what I decided. You're gonna see that episode. You're gonna see my review on that episode soon. But in case this episode, Mole Hunt, is about the episode actually begins with the robes, the shadow board. They get up and they are in their council room, and they reveal that whatever they call it, the turning, but they reveal that the turning has started early, and that's another member needs to join their ranks. At which point they host a massive ritual which kind of causes things to go a little bit crazy around the world. For example, on the flight boards at a local airport, it says it is coming, and then a crop circle appears that shows the pictures of the Shadow Council. So at which point they begin the initiation and reveal that they're going to recruit another one to their ranks, which it's going to be very interesting to see, because that is in fact the plot of the rest of the season. But Meanwhile, Brett and Reagan then proceed to reveal to the rest of their team that they're actually ahead on their quotas for their mission, and they finished them all in record time. And at which point Reagan tells them that as thanks, JR sent them a bunch of publicity, a bunch of shield packages to show his support, and everybody is seemingly happy at first, seemingly appreciating the fact that JR appreciates them, but then they discover that it's actually tote bags, with Mike in particular being particularly pissed because he doesn't need a tote bag to carry things because he's got 6 arms. The entire idea of a tote bag is kind of wasted on them, and of course they do point out that their disappointment. But Brett tries to reassure them, pointing out that maybe there's a surprise inside, and sure enough, he then proceeds to pull out a tinfoil hat, and which only serves to make them even more upset, pointing out that that's actual garbage. At which point Reagan decides to advocate on behalf of her team pointing out that that is in fact that she points out that that is a bit of unacceptable, and that they deserve more. She openly points that out. They deserve more than what they're getting than just tote bags. So she then proceeds to scoop up a binder containing all of their missions and all their other things, and she walks into JR's office and tells them that the team has been busting their ass, and tells them that they've been busting their ass to actually get all their missions done, and points out that they need better promotions, but to this point where JR points out that it has actually finally paid off, and it's revealed that he was actually picked as a possible initiate for the Shadow Council, and points out that after years of kissing every ass up the corporate ladder, he has now finally become top ass, which is a really great quote, and I love that to death. But it's at this point where he points out that he's actually become a member of the Shadow. He's actually going to become a member of the Shadow Council, which he points out is a very big opportunity for him. And of course, Reagan notes that the entire initiation is very Hogwartsy because they sent an owl with a note written in blood, which Reagan recoils at when she discovers that's actually written in blood, and points out that now there's blood on her hands. And of course, JR tells her that she should join the club. It's at which point where it's at this point where he comes out and tells her that now that he's becoming a member of the Shadow Council, he finally is ready to step down as CEO of Cognito Inc. and offers her the job in his place, which causes her to become very over the moon and very happy, and of course is very happy about the opportunity, pointing out that she didn't think this day would ever come. But JR does point out the obvious fact that she's currently holding a binder that says Reagan's inevitable takeover. And of course it does say that because it does contain all of the things she's been doing to try and improve the betterment of the company. But of course Reagan just kind of dismisses it and points out that she's just very happy about the fact that she's finally getting the promotion she wanted this entire time. At which point JR decides to celebrate with her, asking her if she wants to banish someone to shadow prison for fun. Pointing out that is a lot of fun, and that just to banish some poor schmuck, and then he never comes back. But of course, JR does successfully banish someone, I should mention. But Reagan points out that she's not quite ready to actually go mad with power just yet, and that she's going to settle into her role first. JR does appreciate that, but also points out that he does sound like he did when he had more hair. Because if you remember, he's wearing a toupee on his head. But he then proceeds to tell her that she does need to actually consider becoming more ruthless as well. Pointing out that once she's actually the person making the decisions, everything changes. And with Reagan pointing out that that's exactly what she's counting on. At which point, she then proceeds to barge into the atrium of Cognito Inc. and proceeds to make a big spectacle of herself. She's shouting out everybody around the office, and also pushing the globe off the central projector so that she can just stand on top of it. And she tells everyone, the deep state, that now she's controlling them. Which of course the rest of the team all notice her just quickly going mad with power. And I quickly point out that and Mark quickly points out that this probably isn't going to go well. But in any case, it's at this point where JR officially makes a resignation speech, and his resignation speech makes it very clear that he doesn't really care about any of the other people under his charge. He only really viewed them as people that he was obligated to work with, because that's his job. He literally in his speech he goes, as I've worked in this company, I have not just seen you as a you're not just employees to me, but I've seen you more as a group of people that I've been legally obligated to work with 40 hours a week. And then he makes a quote from one of the Terminator movies saying that we are done professionally, at which point he leaves, and Reagan then proceeds to take over the speech and proceeds to show everybody all the new improvements that she's going to be making, dubbing the new era Cognito 2.0. where she then proceeds to reveal the entire that she actually has multiple plans about what she's planning to do, namely that she's going to give neck support for their Easter Island population because they currently don't have that, and of course the Easter Island people are very appreciative about how ergonomic it is. One of them falls over, emphasizing Reagan's point. But also she plans to also increase subliminal messaging for the things that really matter, including recycling, taking out your garbage, doing all good things for people to be subliminally messaged into doing. So just generally, that's the point. But in case it's at this point she also points out that she created an ethics bot, which becomes a recurring character throughout the episode. And of course she points out that its purpose is to make sure all of their missions are morally acceptable. And of course the robot then proceeds to scan the entire team, telling them that the entire group of people at Cognito Inc, telling them that they're 51% not evil, which of course is appreciated by the crowd. And also finally she then proceeds to tell her team that she's going above and beyond to actually get them things that actually matter, and emphasize that they've done a job well done. At which point, she reveals that she got everybody crew jackets, which Brett is particularly excited about because his face is on a jacket and he couldn't be happier. And when Mike voices that he can't be bought off with a crew jacket, pointing out that he demands something a little bit more. She then reveals that she actually upgraded his milking machine, which enables him to milk 6 tentacles at once. And of course, it's not so subtle. That's a weird masturbation machine for Mike. The episode where they revealed that wasn't subtle about that either. But this is a bit more on the nose. At which point, Mike, now happy with what he's received, then tells her that he would live and die by her, and hopes that they'll continue to go onward through 2024 and beyond, which is ironic given the show got canceled for a second season. But we'll get to, as I said, we'll get to that. But that did not age well. I will openly admit that quote did not age well in the slightest. But in case, as Reagan celebrates, pointing out that it's going to be a new year into 2024. But so it's at this point, and telling them that that's finally a deep state you can trust. It's at this point where JR then proceeds to go to put everything into a red alert, telling everybody that they shouldn't trust anybody and that there's been a security breach. At which point all of the department heads go into JR's office, where he then proceeds to explain the situation, and he's obviously very upset and very pissed off. He points out that obviously he thinks someone is trying to screw him, and right before he is about to go and ascend to the shadow board, and proceeds to tell anybody that they've got a mole in the leak, that they've got a mole in the building, and that somebody has stolen the unspoken file. Which, of course, Brett of course doesn't fully understand what they're talking about. So at which point, Gigi just slaps him, asking him if he's got a brain under that pretty face of his. At which point, Reagan then reveals what the unspoken file actually is. It's a dossier of every conspiracy they've ever been involved with. Which, is a very big problem, because, as Reagan points out, if that gets leaked, it could screw over the entire company and dismantle the whole thing from the inside out. And of course, Brett points out that, JR points out that obviously, if that file were to actually leak, they'd actually be banished to Shadow Prison X, which is the place where people get banished to, and as Andre points out, is a place so secret they don't even know where it is, let alone for that reason, everybody's very much on edge. But Reagan just reassures them that they should probably calm the hell down, pointing out that it's probably not that big a deal. But of course, it's at this point where she also points out that they'll find the mole, they'll work toward it, and that they just need to keep a level head about it. But it's at this point where JR just kind of loses all of his calm, and then proceeds to flood the entire atrium and fill it with sharks trained to Krav Maga, which of course kills somebody. I should mention it does kill somebody. They do kill somebody, but it's at this point where JR then proceeds to point out that he's going to be late for his inauguration as a member of the Shadow Board, and then proceeds to tell Reagan that she has exactly 10 hours she has until the end of the day to find the mole, or he's going to banish every single one of the department heads. At which point he leaps off the balcony outside of his office and onto a drone. And then gives Reagan a good luck on the promotion. At which point he leaps through the ceiling, and she just hollers back that she hopes he survives his as well. At which point the episode then proceeds to dove into an A plot and a B plot, where JR is currently trying to work his way through the initiation to actually become a member of the Shadow Board, and it's actually a really fun little vignette, and I'll kind of go into that as it happens. So yeah, the opening episode because it does kind of spoil parts of the episode, and I think it'll flow a little bit better if I do it this way, but. In any case, at this point where JR arrives at the place where he's supposed to go for his initiation, and of course it's this hidden chamber in the middle of a mountain, and of course nobody's ever gonna find it. It's in a giant cave in the middle of nowhere. But JR points out that it's gonna be fine. They don't know about the leak. He's not gonna worry about it. So he walks into the room and of course makes a big play about how everything is fine. He's very much like, hey, Shadow Council, keeping it shady, what up, and all of that. And at which point he looks around and wonders if this is where he's coming for his initiation. But it's at this point where the Shadow Board tells him that they didn't bring him here to give him a robe. And of course JR immediately assumes the worst and assumes they know about the leak, but and of course he's dropped down a trapdoor, realizing and he thinks his worst fears have been realized. But then they explain that they've actually brought him to compete into the death for one. At which point he looks around and he realizes that it is actually not Shadow Prison, but actually a giant maze full of deadly traps, as the Shadow Council explains, and that's his goal is to beat the other potential candidates for a member to become a member of the Shadow Board to the end of the maze. That's all. And of course the maze is full of deadly traps, so the stakes are pretty high. But of course he then starts looking around, and of course he sees Xanthar from the Lizard People episode, as well as Mark Zuckerberg, who again is also a lizard person, and the Pope. So yeah, he's got a pretty interesting. He quickly states the lay of the competitors, and does conclude that since two of them are actually old people, are actually crusty old people, that he's not going to worry about them. And JR's words, not mine. Obviously, old people are the greatest. They're full of wisdom and experience. Listen to them. But yeah, obviously, JR is not a very sympathetic person at all. So of course he's going to describe them as that. But in case it's at this point where he actually sees Oprah, who, if you remember, JR had actually talked to her on the phone in the very first episode. And as we find out here, she is a member of the Illuminati, which makes perfect sense. I mean, she gives everybody cars. She's got to get that money from somewhere. But in case Oprah and JR then proceed to exchange witty banter, with JR pointing out that how if things are going well at the Illuminati, and of course they hit it off like they're old rivals, of course, because obviously, as we find out later, the Illuminati is in fact a rival company, not actually, and that yeah, because that's a thing. That's an actual thing that people think, that the Illuminati is this evil shadow council that's running the world. When actually, all they know in this series, they are in fact separate things. They are the Shadow Board is running Cognito Inc, and then the Illuminati is a rival company that's also trying to run the world. So they are established to be separate things. But in case after exchanging witty banter, they then proceed to make their way through the maze, and of course they quickly knows that the Pope gets taken out immediately by deadly snakes, and he curses his god before going down. At which point JR points out that this is gonna be a snap. At which point Oprah wonders how he's actually going to be able to navigate his way through, and JR points out that the maze is just a building designed to confuse people and make them concern them with lies, and points out that he's been running a building like that for 40 years. At which point he then proceeds to expertly navigate the maze, and Oprah takes notice of that and follows him. But in case Reagan is currently freaking out because she's trying to figure out who the mole is, And and of course, she has exactly 10 hours to do it, or everybody gets disappeared. And obviously, this is the biggest stake. These are the biggest stakes that she's ever had to deal with, because obviously she hasn't been in charge before. And on her first day, they have to find a mole that's potentially going to present a security problem. So for that reason, she has to really, really try hard to find out who the mole secretly is. And of course, it's at this point where they do wonder who could be among their people, and it's at this point where Reagan points out that she has a pretty good idea of who the mole might be, pointing out that swearing revenge and getting out is pretty much his whole deal. At which point they go to see Robotus, who as you might remember has been living in the basement, obviously has access to all the security feeds. And obviously he points out, and obviously because he's a psychotic robot who tried to commit omnicide. He's obviously would be the absolute perfect candidate. But of course he points out that he's not actually the mole. Pointing out that he couldn't have possibly gotten out of the basement, and as he points out that he's been trying to actually kind of live and learn and forget and kind of move on from the fact that he tried to commit mass genocide that one time. And of course Reagan doesn't trust a word that comes out of Robotus's mouth, but she also points out that there is some semblance of truth to it, because obviously he couldn't have been the mole because his casing's still intact. If he had been the mole, he probably would have broken out and stolen the file. But and of course she points out that also means that means it probably isn't him. But it's at this point where Robotus proposes a possibility, pointing out that she saw on the that since he's plugged into the security systems and is observing the security feeds, he knows that whoever broke into JR's office would have to have department head clearance, which the rest of the team quickly realizes means it's probably one of them. At which point after realizing this revelation and plot twist, they then proceed to return back upside to JR's office, I guess Reagan's office now, but to JR's office, where they then proceed to try and figure out which one of them is actually the mole. Of course they immediately point to Mike, and ask him if he's able to actually read them through his psychic powers. But of course Mike quickly points out that he went a little bit overboard testing Reagan's machine, so for that reason she can't actually psychically read anybody's minds. And of course it's at this point where Glenn points out that sounds very much like mole talk. But it's at this point where obviously Mike points out the obvious hypocrisy with Glenn's name as well, because as she points out, Glenn's backstory doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Pointing out that he was a man who became a dolphin, yet his last name has always been Dolphman, which of course is a little bit shady. And of course he points out that he's calling bullshit, but of course Reagan then eventually diffuses the situation, pointing out that she finds out that whoever has stolen the file, obviously it hasn't left the building yet, because as she points out, it hasn't left the building yet. They haven't had anybody leave the building yet. So for that reason, she points out that it's probably that the file, for the time being, is likely still in the offices somewhere, and they just need to find it. And if they find it, they'll find the mole. So of course they then immediately start with Brett, who, as they point out, is creepily clean, finding out that he has an entire drawer of Purell, which is they point out some American Psycho stuff, and Gigi points out that actually is kind of creepy on its own. But of course Brett insists that he's a clean slate and that he has nothing to hide. But then Reagan's ethics bot scans him and discovers that he has the concealed item. At which point they rip his shirt open to discover he's wearing a wire. And of course, it's at this point where Reagan kind of snaps at him, pointing out that she was right about him from day one, about how he's some sort of secret sleeper agent, and wonders if he and the rest of the team decide to test his reflexes, but which results in Brett getting hit a lot. At which point Brett points out that actually he's not the mole. He's actually just keeping an audio diary, and he does proceed to reveal that the wire is in fact his audio diary, which he points out was actually created as a direct response as a complete direct response to the fact that this team emotionally gaslights him a lot. which and of course after concluding he's not the mole, they then proceed to move on to the next people in his list, which as it turns out is actually Gigi. And they then start searching through Gigi's stuff, and of course they start looking for things, and well, they don't find the unspoken file. They do find applications from rejected applications, as I mentioned, from Gigi for the Illuminati, which of course they point out is their rival company, and obviously it's kind of bad that she's applying for a job there. And at which point Reagan proposes the possibility that Gigi might have sold out their team, and their entire company, and JR in particular, in exchange for a comfy new job at the Illuminati. But of course, Gigi points out that she wouldn't have done that, and points out that if she had done it, she would have canceled them all with a tweet, and points out that she has canceled tweets locked and loaded for all of them. At which point, and tells them that if they don't, that they should probably watch their step and not get on her bad side anymore. At which point they then proceed to go and search Glenn's office, and they can't find anything in particular about Glenn. And Glenn tells them that there's nothing that they're going to find. But then Reagan notices that he's standing in front of a vault and isn't letting anybody look inside of it. And Glenn tries to tell them that it's nothing, pointing out that obviously there's nothing of secret inside there. But at which point Reagan then grabs the giant robot that I should mention appeared in the first episode as a time card thing, as a thing that Reagan used to threaten people to do their time cards. And is now coming full circle, because now it is here in the first episode, but in the second to last episode of the first half of season 1. But and of course she proceeds to use it to bust open the safe. And what they quickly find out is that it's not actually, as Glenn points out, it is nothing. It's actually revealed to actually just be a wig and pieces of a disguise, which of course Mike seems to point a tentacle at, pointing out that it might in fact implicate him as a double agent, but of course Glenn then proceeds to point out that it's actually not anything of the sort at all, revealing that he's actually been going undercover to recruit teenagers to become drone pilots for the military, and that's what he uses the disguises for. And so after realizing that's clean, that he's clean, they realize that that's probably nothing. At which point, and also finally, then they proceed to actually go and look into Andre's office. I did these a little bit out of order, but they then proceed to go into Andre's office, and it's at this point where they then proceed to go and explore Andre's office, and they find out that Andre's office is actually a wreck. And when they wonder if it is in fact if Andre's office was already ransacked, he just points out that was actually just how he keeps his office. At which point they start looking into it, and it's at this point, and after looking through it a little bit, they discover that actually that they also propose that he might have destroyed his office in a fit of rage, which isn't true. But they start looking through it, and they eventually discover that the Health Drug Association is refusing to actually approve Andre's truth serum, and it's at this point where he reveals that for obvious reasons, normal drugs don't really work on Andre anymore. He points out that the only thing that really gives him any sort of rush anymore is cold hard truths. At which point Gigi points out that that's actually kind of disgusting, and points out that if he ever lives to 40, she hopes that he'll find peace with himself, which she immediately backs off when she finds out that Andre is secretly enjoying it, of course she backs off. But in any case, after going through the rest of the department heads, it's at this point where Reagan concludes that Mike is secretly the mole, and she then proceeds to kind of grab him with the giant robot, and it's at this point where they realize that they need to kind of defuse the situation and take a breather. It's at this point where Brett tells Reagan to calm down, pointing out that it's obvious that they obviously know it's a problem, but blowing up at Mike probably isn't going to do anything. So they calm her down, and of course points out that while they're all that he does understand that Reagan is a bit upset because she's trying to find a mole, but he also points out that he thinks his team is telling the truth, and points out that he doesn't think they're hiding anything. At which point this gives Reagan a very brilliant idea. That's if they're not going to be able to find out who the department heads are, who the department's heads are normally, and find out what their secrets are hiding, they're going to have to use the truth serum to find it. And And of course, at this point where the ethics spot yells at them, pointing out that that's unethical, but Reagan just mutes him. At which point, they then proceed to point out that she then points out that it might be the only way, and Brett reluctantly agrees to help her. Meanwhile, back in the maze, where JR is currently working his way through to try and figure out who the Shao Council, how to become a member of the Shao Council. What is it? Oprah then proceeds to confront him and offer him a proposal, pointing out that obviously he knows he's going to be able to work his way through the maze and help become a robe, but she then points out that he's going to be the one to get her a robe, and of course JR rejects the notion of that, asking her why he would even bother to do that, and she does point out that that she knows Cognito has a mole, and that if there isn't going to be unless JR wants the Shao Council knowing that he can't keep his house clean, that he's going to help her become a robe and get the robe that she wants. And of course, JR points out that he really doesn't seem like he has a choice, and does offer to do it for her as a deal, pointing out that she did give him a car that one time. At which point they do proceed to kind of stack up on each other, piggyback style, and it's at this point where obviously JR asks her how she knows, and obviously we know about how Gigi had actually been looking for employment elsewhere, and she does proceed to point that out to him, and he points out that that is obviously because he seemingly uses them as game picks at one time, which of course is very obviously a thing, but it's very obviously a thing that needs to be addressed at some point, and obviously JR is not a very morally correct person. Obviously, he's a very evil, very, very, very evil, very rich person. So, of course, he's going to be a little bit shady. But in case at this point where Reagan then proceeds to sit everybody down and offers them all a drink, which obviously has been laced with Andre's Stooge serum, and she points out that she's sorry for being so hard on them, and points out that obviously she wants to try and turn over a new leaf and try and be a better team leader. And for that reason, she offers them a toast. And when they accept the toast, they all drink. At which point, she reveals that she actually roofied all of their glasses with truth serum. And at which point she then proceeds to tell them that now they have no choice but to tell the truth. And it's at this point when she decides to start with Gigi and asks Gigi if she's the mole. And Gigi, of course, points out that she's not the mole because she's telling the truth. And of course reveals that the reason she applied for the Illuminati when Reagan prompts her is because she doesn't believe that anybody respects her or even knows her last name for that matter. And of course, kind of proving her point, Mike then proceeds to ask if her last name is Luigi, which it's not, it's Thompson. But and of course she immediately blows up at him and responds that she's going to kick whatever he has instead of an ass. At which point it's at this point where Brett, trying to defuse the situation, asks Mike if he's the mole, and Mike insists that he is not. But then proceeds to tell everybody about their dark secrets, and telling them that he's been in their heads all year. He's able to read their thoughts psychically, and he then proceeds to go on to reveal all of everybody's dark secrets. But specifically, that Reagan has a Carl Sagan fetish. That Brett secretly thinks Reagan's mom is hot. That Andre and Gigi secretly hooked up at the company Christmas party, and that Glenn secretly has sex fantasies about all of them. Which yeah, but and of course it's at this point where of course everybody goes out of line, and it's at this point where Glenn reveals that he never trusted Mike in the first place, and especially after what Mike just said to them. And then proceeds to tell them that he's been secretly trying to get Mike deported back to the center of the earth where he belongs. Which of course causes Reagan to become visibly shocked and concerned when she discovers that obviously Glenn was trying to deport Mike. And of course, he then proceeds to insist, and of course, at this point where Andre then proceeds to rebut in, pointing out that obviously was a bit, that he's obviously noticing that it is in fact a fight between two very bizarre organisms, and he's betting on who will win. But of course, it's at this point where Mike calls him out, pointing out that calling him Tommy Chong, which if you don't know is obviously a very heavy drug user guy. I don't know who he was, but that's all I kind of know about him. But of course, he points out that the only reason that they actually store drugs, and points out that he's likely the mole. But it's at this point where Andre points out that he's actually not the mole, and it reveals that he's not even a real doctor in the first place. And this visibly shocks everybody. And he then proceeds to go on to explain how he flunked out of med school in his first year, and that he actually photoshopped his PhD from an episode of Doc McStuffins, which of course causes Glenn in particular to blow up at him, pointing out that obviously he's the mole. He realizes that now Andre has lied to him about the fact that he is actually a doctor, because obviously Glenn, he's half dolphin, and he reveals that Andre was the one who signed off for the surgery and did it for him. And of course, Andre then proceeded to trust Andre, because Andre kept telling him, "Relax, I'm a doctor," and when he's obviously not now. But of course, Andre then proceeds to point out that he's a turn that's just a turn of phrase, and that's just something people say. At which point he points out that he's not he doesn't really care if he's going to shuttle prison, and then points out the same, pointing out that if they're going to take him, they're going to have to take a fight, and he then proceeds to reveal that the pyramid that's at the center of the table of their conference room is actually a secret weapons cache button that then proceeds to open up weapons, in which everybody grabs one and is immediately at each other's throats with. And of course, Reagan at this point tries to defuse the situation, pointing out that everybody needs to stop fighting amongst each other. And of course, it's at this point where they tell her that she needs to back off, pointing out that they're not going to let everybody. That if obviously they went through everybody and nobody seems to be the mole. And Brett points out the very obvious fact that if nobody's the mole, then that means there's just miraculously another subject and a suspect. And but points out also the possibility, the preposterousness of the fact that another perfect subject could just fall out of the sky. And case in point, Rand Ridley then proceeds to break through the ceiling and crashes onto the ground. And of course they do point out that obviously they point out the very obvious problem that Rand isn't supposed to be there. Obviously, Rand isn't supposed to be in the building, and of course at this point where Reagan points out that obviously he's asking him what he's doing there, and of course Rand then proceeds to point out that obviously he knows it looks bad. He knows he's a disgruntled ex-employee who would obviously have sworn revenge on the company he works for, but that was revealed that he actually has a very real reason for why he's there. I'm revealing that actually he's there to wish Reagan a congratulations on the promotion, revealing that he made cupcakes for her, but then reveals that he actually got lost in the vents for a bit, and then proceeds that he reveals that he does have the plate. I should mention he has the plate, but it's empty. Because as he explains, he got lost in the vents and then started boredom eating, listening to all of them go back and forth and be at each other's throats. And of course, it's at this point where obviously they point out that obviously there's no way that Rand should be able to get in, pointing out that he was fired from the company, and do wonder how he even has clearance. At which point he reveals that he borrowed Reagan's and pulls out the clone hands from Reagan from one of the earlier episodes where all the clones of John F. Kennedy got loose, and of course at this point where they realize that now they have a motive, they now have a motive, and they now know the means of how he got in the building. So at which point all the department heads proceed to jump to conclusions that he is in fact the mole, and insist that with Glenn in particular insisting that he hands over the file. But of course, they then proceed to corner him on one of the balconies, and it's at this point where of course Reagan then proceeds to defuse the situation, then telling them that obviously she figured out the motive now, and that whoever stole that file wanted to turn the entire team against one another, and points out, just in the best possible way, of course, that Rand truly does not care about any single one of them, and Rand does confirm that, pointing out that. Now, obviously, he doesn't know any of their names, much less cares about them enough to actually want to see them break their bond with each other and go at each other's throats. But But of course, it's at this point where Brett points out that obviously it's possibly the most likely possible scenario. That it was one of them, either the member of the team or it was her own father. At which point the ethics robot shows up and then proceeds to tell them that it is definitely a conundrum choosing her work family over her real family. At which point Reagan tells the robot that lording its ethics over people isn't very ethical, and the robot has a kind of has an internal error and explodes because when it realizes that ethics aren't ethical, which causes it to blow up. But of course, it's at this point where they all insist that they need to obtain that they're sorry they have to turn on Reagan, but that they need to find the mole. At which point, Reagan decides to choose her father over her friends, and then calls Barrow to help assist. Who then proceeds to grab both of them and jump over the balcony. And it's at this point where Rams then proceeds to lead Reagan to a place where they can actually go and find the mole in peace. While the rest of the gang is trying to blow them up with missiles and other things, one of which of course Barrow takes and successfully survives, I should mention. But they do bring it, but of course Barrow does wind up getting shut down for a bit in the episode because he took a missile to the face. But it's at this point where Rand then proceeds to pull them over to the Mayan calendar that's been in the episode for pretty much the entire first season, for pretty much the entire series, and then reveals that it's actually a secret passage, and he and Reagan then proceed to go inside of it and close it off, and Gigi kind of points out the hypocrisy of that, pointing out that obviously there's a secret tunnel inside the Mayan calendar, but no paid maternity leave, which she points out is bullshit. At which point the team realizes that they need to go after her, but Brett obviously points out the very obvious problem that they went inside shark-infested waters and there's not really a safe place. But it's at this point where Glenn then proceeds to grab the giant robot mech thing and then points out that he's going to open up a can of dolphin-themed whoop-ass. At which point Rand then proceeds to lead Reagan into a secret bunker that is inside the place, and of course Reagan points out the obvious problem that they need to figure out who the mole is within the next couple of hours, or everybody's either going to get banished, fired, or eaten by sharks, which of course Rand points out is all pretty redundant, but he does bring her down into the bunker, and he does reveal that he knows exactly how he's going to find the mole, at which point he leads her inside a secret surveillance room, which of course he points out built during the Reagan era to weed out cocaine addicts, and use it for conspiracy theories and other things, and of course Reagan points out the very obvious problem that he somehow managed to successfully build a secret surveillance state inside a secret surveillance state. But Rand does point out that he's obviously gets that, but they then proceed to point out that he's obviously going to find that this is how they're going to find the mole, and he does point out that back in his day, that the fear flowed like wine, and the cameras never stopped rolling, and as he's queuing up the surveillance tapes to try and figure out who the mole actually is, he notices that Reagan seems visibly distraught, when he notices that, she points out that obviously it's her first day in the job. She's already had to betray her team and turn against her friends, and for that, and also she can't even find one lousy mole. Which of course she wonders if it means she has to be as ruthless as JR, like he said, But of course, Rand points out that she doesn't be anything like JR, and that she got the job that she's been training for because she's been training for it since she was 6. She has always wanted this job, and that obviously she's now finally has it. And she should point out that no matter what, she shouldn't let anything dissuade her from actually fulfilling the career that she's always wanted. At which point he asks her to continue. He asks her to continue queuing up the surveillance tapes while he gets some wine for them to drink. At which point we then proceed to see the final cutaway with JR, where JR and Oprah have finally arrived at the final puzzle, and Oprah, and of course this is the final task where they have to stop a wall from crushing them, and they have to choose between 2 doors, a bear and a bull. And of course it's at this point where where they point out that this is the final trial, and that JR is going to have to pull through, and JR then proceeds quickly and realizes that the answer is the bull. And of course at this point where Oprah wonders if JR is trying to trick her, pointing out that's absolutely something we would do, but of course JR points out that he would have to be a complete snake to do something like that, and she points out that that's actually a very good point, and then proceeds to walk over to the bear door rather than the bull door. And as it turns out, she chose wrong and winds up almost falling through a trap door. At which point JR walks over to her and reveals that actually yes, he knew that he is a complete snake, but also points out that obviously he is a liar, which means the only way he was ever going to be able to trick her was to tell the truth. And of course she becomes upset, wondering how he even knew the answer in the first place. At which point he points out that the ropes prefer a bull market, and he should know because he's about to be one. At which point he opens the correct door, and then proceeds to go through and adjust himself before going through. And that's the last we see of him for this episode. Meanwhile, Reagan is trying to queue up the surveillance tapes, but because they're old and very out of date, they're taking a while, and they're obviously, as she points out, they're like computers the size of a house. So obviously they're not going to be very fast. But of course, at this point where the team then proceeds to bang on the door, with the giant robot, I should mention. And she points out that she's gonna need more. That she just needs more time to find the mole, and that she didn't want to hurt anyone. But it's at this point where Brett points out through the surveillance tapes, through the surveillance camera, that she already has. At which point, she then proceeds to ask her dad if there's anything in the surveillance room that can actually help them hold off her team. And of course, at this point where he points out that they've actually have remote controlled cryptids, which she points out is their first generation of conspiracy theories, and that they just have the charm of practical effects that he kind of just loves. At which point he turns them all on as the team is barging in, and he rides in on a robotic Bigfoot while the rest of the cryptids get ready to face off against the team. And he then proceeds to tell the department heads that they don't know who he's messing with, and that he's the man who killed Disco. Which, if you don't know, this is a good time for a history lesson now. If you don't know, Disco was very popular in the 70s, and not anymore. And the reason for that is that Disco kind of died, and not a very natural death. Thanks in large part to an ill-advised White Sox promotion called Disco Demolition Night, where as the name implies, they in an effort to try and fill seats for what was otherwise a lackluster season, the White Sox assembled a bunch of disco records on the field and blew them up at halftime and blew them up during the 7th inning stretch. And that was their halftime promotion to try and get people to come in and get everybody to come in to see this entire box of disco things explode. And it culminated in a riot because nobody was there to actually watch the game. It was just a bunch of disgruntled rock and roll fans who assembled into the stadium. You came to see the box explode, and then swarmed the field in a riot once their quote unquote game was over. And it resulted in disco being more or less permanently dying, because now it has a very massive riot and a whole bunch of other things associated with it. Because if you didn't know, the White Sox are the ones who actually killed Disco, and it's implied that Rand was actually responsible for orchestrating that entire thing. So yeah. At which point, in any case, long story short, the cryptids then proceed to fight back against the department heads, and with Rand leading the charge, I should mention, and of course at this point where Reagan insists that these are her friends and she doesn't want to hurt anybody, and of course, after seeing everybody fighting for a couple of minutes, she then proceeds to shut off the robotic cryptids, and then proceeds to tell everybody that she's the mole. Which, of course, she points out she isn't actually the mole when they show their disbelief, but points out that they're obviously going to die anyway. So she decides that she's going to confess to be the mole and take one for the team, so that there can be a team. And she points out that obviously there has to be and of course the rest of the department heads point out that there has to obviously be a way, and that there must be another solution to actually kind of find the mole, instead of just letting Reagan sacrifice herself. But it's at this point where the security feeds finally finish queuing up, and It's this point where Rand points out that that now they can prove once and for all that he's not the mole, but then discover, much to their shock, that Barrow's the mole. At which point the power somewhat goes out, and Barrow rolls into the room and asks Reagan if she wants a hug. So yeah, this is where the twist comes in, that Barrow was the mole pretty much the whole time, and that would explain why he's been in multiple episodes. So yeah, they established that he's something shady, and obviously, at this point, I should point out a very obvious thing, and that's this doesn't necessarily mean Barrow's evil. An AI can't be evil because he's just a robot, but yeah, it does beg the question of why he did it, if not for any personal reason. Because obviously he's trying to dismantle the team, but why is the question that will come up in the next episode. But yeah, this is the second to last episode of the first half of season 1, and then hopefully season 2 will happen eventually once they get everything squared away. But you know, we're getting there, so I will absolutely continue reviewing it. But Unfortunately, this is gonna be probably another cliffhanger, because obviously we're gonna get to the end of season 1 eventually. There's not gonna be a season 2, and I've mentioned that at the start of the review. It's gonna be interesting. But in any case, that's gonna do it for my review of Inside Job. What did you guys think? Let's get us going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks out of my way of saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Links down in the description. Yeah. In any case, yeah. Thank you guys. And also be sure to check out the videos linked in the screen as well. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this video. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. And I have no idea where it's going to send you. So please just go check that out and tell me where it's going to send you. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.